You are listening to the Gird Up Podcast. To gird up is an ancient way of preparing oneself for hard work or a battle ahead. Our work is to reclaim masculinity in the modern world and to live out our calling as men of God. Here you will find a community of believers working hard to become the men that God created us to be. Now it's time to roll up your sleeves and let's get to work. All right. JD Ulhorn, welcome to the den, man. The Gird Up Den.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is the first time you've been here, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here, man.
Thanks.
So who is JD Ulhorn, man? Tell us who you are.
Big question right off the bat, huh? Born and raised Phoenix, Arizona. So, yeah, definitely not Midwestern, but slowly becoming more and more Midwestern every bit. Close to a decade now that I've been up here. Enjoyed living down there, going to high school there, getting to play sports, spending a lot of time outside, even in the summers, to the point where like mom would call me back in. She's like, okay, maybe not in the middle of the day because it gets pretty intense. But yeah, so shaped by that a little bit, shaped by family, obviously. Love for sports. Love for God's word, which I know, we'll get a chance to talk about, and the whole ministry path and everything there. But I don't know, in a lot of ways, just your regular guy.
Yeah.
Sports, music, God.
I love it. I like that.
People
Sports,
person.
music, God. Sports, music, God, and people. I like that a
Yep.
lot.
Not
so
necessarily in that order.
It depends on the day, right? Okay, sorry, I shouldn't say that.
No, you're good.
Okay. So
You're good.
what are you doing right now? What's your ministry right now?
Okay. So, right now, here in New Ulm, right on the hill, back on the hill, Martin Luther College, and being privileged to be one of the tutors there. So, and people ask me that all the time. Because even if I were to say tutor, right, they want me to break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and usually I give them 5 things. Say, here's what I am. Dorm supervisor, teacher, coach, chapel and worship guy, and then just campus life activities.
There you
And
go.
underlying all of that is a mentor and an encourager
Right.
for the students.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you want to flesh out like how does that look on a day-to-day basis? Like what are your
Sure.
responsibilities at the college?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my schedule is completely flipped. So, it turns into staying up much later at night and maybe getting a little bit more sleep on the other end, sleeping in a little bit. Just kind of adjust with that.
I suppose you got to be awake when the students are awake.
Yeah. Comes with living in a dorm again, that way. So that's a change. And then, some of the morning hours, that's a real prep. I kind of take things a little bit slow at the pace there and gather materials and respond to a bunch of emails because a lot of emails flood in. But you go from there, and then classes in the afternoon. Might step into practice pretty shortly after that and come back, get dinner, evening chapel, and then, there's a ton of events going on. And I like to be present, right? Because that's one of the things. Ministry of presence.
Yeah.
I think that becomes huge just in this role.
I like that idea. Ministry of presence.
Yeah,
That's a big deal.
it is.
That's a good way to put it too. It's not like it's not necessarily getting your hands in everything all the time, but being around and being present. I like that a lot.
Right.
I like that a lot. Good. So you are a pastor.
Yes, correct.
So you're just recently ordained. Right?
Yeah, almost 2 months ago.
All right.
Yep.
And this is your first call here, as it is for most tutors.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a rule, but it is for most tutors.
Right.
So you just finished up Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary. Where did you do your vicar year?
Yeah, vicar year. So, had the 4 years at MLC, New Ulm, Minnesota, and then go over to SEM, get to Mequon. Vicar year, you get your first taste of call day, really. I mean, you've seen it, and you see it for your friends, and that's exciting, and it's fun, to be there, be a part of all that. But then when it comes around and you're gearing up for vicar year, it's your first shot at that. Not that you have any control really when that comes, but it's gonna affect you and your life pretty deeply. So you get there, and then with me having a last name, so far back.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Ugamak,
you know how it is. We just share that.
All the way back there. At least we're not a W. The W's really have it
Right.
rough, man.
I know.
W's and Z's. Glad I'm not a W or a Z.
Right. Amen to that.
You just sit there and listen to all the names read.
Yep.
And you're just sweating.
Yeah.
Even because they tell you ahead of time, like, if it's for teacher call day, like, there's a chance that you don't get a call, right? And for most people do. But sometimes either they just don't have the right fit, or things didn't quite work out, and you're in favor of you starting your ministry at that point, right? And so they tell you ahead of time whether or not you're getting a call, but you have no idea where it is. You have no idea what to expect. You don't know anything. Like, you're just sitting there sweating, and then you see like all your friends getting calls, and there's always a couple that you're kind of like, whether or not you're actually advocating for yourself to get that call, like there's a couple that are out there, and you're thinking about them, and some of those start going away, and it's such a bizarre, cool experience. It's a legitimate, like, it's a humility thing for sure. Putting my whole life in the hands of God and a room full of gentlemen who have the wisdom to do what's best.
Right. No, it is surreal. And that's exactly how it went. And I see my friends, and we start to get, spread all over the nation. And so it's coming down, and, my head's spinning a little bit. It's just, it's surreal. So I got there, and then I hear resurrection, right? Because they'll say congregation name first, and then Verona, Wisconsin. And that wasn't even on my radar, really, like, at all. And I didn't know that much about it. And but after that wrapped up, things wrapped up pretty quickly after that. And as I'm stepping out, there's a guy who comes right along the side of me, and that's the pastor that I'm going to be working with. Because being close enough, he was actually able to be there. And so I met him right on the spot. And I'm trying to remember, what exactly did he say to me in that moment, because it was pretty memorable. He says, "Do you love Jesus? Do you love God's word? Do you love the people for whom Jesus died?" Like, it was 3 rapid fire questions, just like that, right away, right off the bat. And I got to respond to all those, obviously clear and resounding yes. And then we were off.
Yeah.
It was like, here we go.
That's awesome.
This is really gonna, get started. And so Verona, but really that's how it was read. But it turns out that there's 2, because it's Verona and Monroe. And we're working in a multi-site congregation. So it is just the one congregation, but it's in 2 spots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up living just outside of Madison. And that's, Verona is real close there. So church is 3 minutes to get to Verona campus, but it's 40 minutes to get all the way down to Monroe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And fantastic year. Like, with, getting that call, and then hearing Wisconsin, and then, not really knowing much about it. And then I'd say it took me 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I was like, this is exactly where I need to be. And obviously, God knows exactly what he's doing. And I was so, like, content. I didn't have everything figured out, but so content and so happy to be right there.
Awesome. So what made you say that? What about this situation made you say that?
Sure. Well, it's the uniqueness of the congregation, I'd say. They're very welcoming. They're not new to Vickers at all, right? They've had a long stretch of them. And so they bring you in right away. And just, I think it's still very much a mission-minded congregation, which is really cool and really refreshing to find right here in the heartland, or right in Wisconsin. Because, everything, the building, basically got started at the turn of the millennium. It's like 20 years in now. And so, it's still kind of relatively fresh, and they've got a huge opportunity, because Madison, that brings people from all over, and people will be, all outside of the city and work then inside of it. So huge field, and just a welcoming congregation. Even the way the building is structured is meant to encourage, just accentuate, those kinds of gifts. And it really does come through. It came through to me right away. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Any big time memories that just stick out as like a moment so you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do?
Yeah. Just over Vicar Year, you're thinking?
Well, or anything.
Or just
Yeah,
anything?
Anywhere.
Well, let me share one from Vicar Year at least. Here's what I would say to, anyone who asks me what was the biggest thing over Vicar Year. So permit me a little story here, okay?
Absolutely.
All right. So it is early. It's early in that part of the year. Arrived at the very beginning of August. So, just a couple months in, and it's October, and it's, getting towards the weekend. It's probably a Friday. I think it's a Friday night. And I get word from Pastor, and he says that Josh has been in a really rough accident. Now understand, okay, so Josh is a guy who is, at that time, he's just a couple years older than me. I think he's about the age that you are right now. And yeah, it was late at night, and got into an accident that roughed him up, pretty good. And so I heard about it, and I got to go in, during the weekend. And it's tough because I had only started, just a little bit to get to know him, get a little bit close with him. And this happens, and you step into the hospital room, and he just, doesn't look like himself at all. And it's tough. That's tough, to step in there. He can only react so much. He can only say so much at that point. I mean, a lot of things were up in the air. There were a lot of questions surrounding that entire thing. But yeah, so to be there, right? Ministry of presence. We talked about that a little bit. But then all of a sudden I was doing that right away. And that would continue for a long time because, it just took a long time to get him back on his feet. And thankfully, he did. And as all of this is happening, he's expecting a child.
Oh.
Yeah. So on top of that, right? And so for a moment, like not just the family, but even a family that hasn't quite yet fully been, realized.
Yeah.
Is banking on this, and they weren't quite sure, right, if he was actually going to come out on the other side of this. Just really over that initial weekend, and then things started to really go, trend upwards, which was amazing blessing. So, that whole road to recovery, and then spending time getting into the hospital every so often, just to spend time and visit, give devotions, and obviously that's where I really got close with him. So as we got to the end, and as he was, starting to entertain even the idea of stepping back into church, crutches and all.
Yeah.
He, pulls me aside during one of the visits, and he says, "Would you baptize my child?"
Oh, man. That's cool.
Yeah. And I was just kind of taken aback a little bit, but I was like, well, of course, that would be a huge privilege. Yeah, so glad to do that. So we had that set up. And then it was, December 15th, 2018. Jacob Robert Kate got to baptize him.
That's awesome.
Which was just incredible.
Yeah. So did Pastor send you in that room all by yourself, or did Pastor come with you?
Well, that first time, no, I was just going.
Riding solo.
So, yeah. Yep.
That's pretty intense 2 weeks in.
It is. 2 months in.
2 months in. Okay.
2 months in. It was
still
about
pretty
October.
Intense.
Yeah.
Still pretty intense.
Agreed.
That's awesome, man. Do you still stay connected with that congregation at all?
Yeah. That's what's really neat, too. So even beyond just that story, and I kind of, hinted at it a little bit, but there's definitely some lifelong friends there. People who took me under their wing, people who were there faithfully during the Thursday night Bible studies. Like that was Vicar's thing. Right? Pastor said, "Hey, here you go. Take this, run with it. You get to pick the book. You're gonna put together the materials, and like this is your class." And I really enjoyed that, and that was one of my favorite things, like structured, expected things that happened over Vicar Year. That was probably my favorite because it was a small group, and so it was close knit. You get those real vulnerable conversations, but you're getting to know each other over a course, and even as the seasons change, like some people are constant, but then sometimes you'll get new families or just new individuals that will come in, and all of a sudden they get plugged into the group, and it's cool to see how the family of believers like continues to mesh and get together, and they're strengthening one another, and it's obviously getting and strengthening you as well, even though you're the one that is supposedly, right, you're leading them through the material, but really, wow, that's just testament to believers strengthening one another and digging into the Word and getting the chance to talk about life there in that setting.
I dig it, man.
Right within church.
That's awesome. Gets me pumped.
Yeah.
Gets me excited. Gives me a little refresher why I'm here and do what I'm doing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Cool. Very cool. So, obviously, at some point you got to make a decision. Like, hey, I'm going to be a pastor. So, what led JD Ulhorn to make that decision? There?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't think it's the traditional route, if there is a traditional route. Some
prep schools.
Yeah. Right. No, some guys, talk about that. They're like, oh, since I was little, this is where it's at. I don't feel that way, really. I don't think I ever did. Just going through high school and being a typical high schooler and really not thinking that much about it. You're kind of consumed in the here and now and just your daily activities and the friends that you have right there. And at that point, like, college just seems so distant. And so it didn't really come until the end of high school. And there were MLC recruiters, that would come down to Arizona and just get their foot in the door. I got a chance to meet with them. So at least it was introduced to me then. But honestly, it came through the campus pastor. So Pastor Bodie, he was the one who kind of nudged me and said, hey, I think you'd actually really enjoy this. I think you'd have some gifts, right, that could be utilized if you take that route. So, it kind of got in my head a little bit. And as I started to look for colleges, I had a couple just criteria. I was thinking, I don't want to get lost in just a giant college. Mm-hmm. And I felt like Arizona, that was all that they had to give. You got your ASU and U of A and even NAU. And it's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. And I, kind of lost that sea feeling. And that wasn't really, at least in my mind, it wasn't for me. So I was already looking outside. I was like, a smaller college, that'd be nice. A Christian college even, didn't have to be necessarily, but obviously, I tend to, look that way. Even like Pacific Christian, because I had the whole idea of like, oh, I think the Northwest is pretty cool. I still think the Northwest is cool. But that was like there in Washington. I'm like, oh, trying to navigate, trying to figure things out that way. Is a potential, could I continue playing basketball somewhere? Again, it would have to be a smaller school. But beyond that, I started to look for majors. I started to look at, what different routes could I go down? And everything I looked into, I didn't feel like a huge spark of passion. I didn't feel like, oh, that's really, this is something I want to get after. So that kept kind of, didn't get checked off the list. But I came back, to the recruiting, to it. Pastor Bodie was encouraging me and seeing like teachers and coaches just on that high school level. And so, it became slowly but surely. It was like revealed to me over time, just to say, hey, what better thing to do, right? Than to get into God's Word yourself, but to do that with the express purpose of let's bring that to others. Let's impact other people's lives just through ministry. And so, and all of a sudden it clicked. And it was halfway through my senior year. And I told Mom, I was like, Mom, I think I want to go. Let's go. I would like to go up to Minnesota. And props to her. Like, she's been extremely supportive throughout the entire journey. And so, I forged ahead. And I came in with a mindset and I said, pastor track or bust. Either I'm going to do this or I'm going to have to go find something else,
That's awesome.
That's how it was.
The long-haired JD had some drive.
Yeah,
huh?
That's right. I know. And then, it wasn't until halfway through freshman year here at MLC that I actually took that out.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. We all had some long-haired days, man.
Right.
All had some long-haired days. So you talk about your mom a little bit.
Yeah.
So what does your family look like?
Sure. So to that, again, kind of non-traditional, I'd say. Really, my immediate family, that is pretty small. And, you get extended, and then that's when the last name kicks in and everyone plays the Wells, name game with me. And that makes sense. And so usually, things are mistaken like, oh, this must be your relative. And yes, they are my relative, but it's a little bit more distant, not as close as they would imagine. So, immediate family growing up, like, honestly, just Mom and me, Dad, I mean, really don't have any memories, that way, because I was probably two or three, and he left. And so at that point on, and it's interesting, right? Because when people learn that about me, and then sometimes they're caught off guard, or sometimes they're a little apologetic, and really I just tell them to relax, because like, this is all I've known. To me, it's very normal. To me, that was how it was growing up. And so I don't have, there are some families, and my heart goes out to, say, if it's those guys, just heart goes out to guys that, have this situation, but it's a little bit different, because they actually remember a time when dad was around, whether that be, like an abandonment type of thing, or just death, whatever it might be. Like, that's tough. And there's a lot more, going on with that than necessarily there is with me. So yeah, unique in that way. So mom and I, very close, very tight, just growing up, and it became kind of women supported, really, throughout my life, because grandpa was there, but I was 8 years old when grandpa passed, back in the winter of 2001. And so from that moment, it was like, well, now grandpa's gone too. But grandma and mom, like stalwarts, in terms of Christian faith, in terms of shaping and molding me, and having, the time to spend. I am grateful for the time that I have to spend with them, and how much they put in, just with me on that end. And so in that way, then I like to make the little biblical comparison to Timothy. I'm talking about mother and grandmother, and I'm like, I get that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, when you say really supportive, what do you like? What does that look like?
Well, honestly, it looks like more than I even recognized or imagined. Again, because it was normal for me, and so I probably didn't even recognize everything that my mom did, especially when I was young. Just to keep things going, just to put so much towards my schooling, towards my success, having involvement in sports, getting together with neighborhood kids. You name it. Any of the little things that we all might take for granted just from our childhoods, is mom being there and being so strong and resilient, not in an overbearing way at all, because I think, and really, you don't have to take my word for it. This is pulled from friends, from the people that know my mom, like how bubbly she is, and sure, very kind, and in my opinion, extremely generous. Not just to me, with me, or family, but that just kind of exudes, from her.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, like while you were talking, that's all I was thinking about was Lois and Eunice, man. Like, that's exactly what that sounds like. I love it. I dig it. And the fact that you're a young pastor now too, like that just, man.
I know.
The only way this could be cooler is if they actually had named you Timothy. That'd be like some real prophecy stuff there,
No
Cool.
kidding.
Very cool. So grandma lives close too, so like cousins and stuff around, or
right. Yeah, and grandma's always been close, and what's interesting is she was 15 minutes away, So yeah, easy, and a lot quicker than getting to high school even, from where I was at. But grandma's always been close, and actually there was a time, and it was several years after grandpa had died, but mom and I went and we moved in with grandma. So then it was really, then it's me, mom, and grandma at her house, which was, the house wasn't bigger, but the backyard was bigger. Okay. So all of a sudden there was a lot of space. And like, that's where I have a lot of memories from really late grade school and then all the way through high school. Just having that dynamic going on. So so really close in that way. And cousins back home, yep. Aunt and uncle there. So, all within, I'd say, less than an hour.
Yeah. So how does that like shape you as a young man? Like, you talked about how you didn't really know anything else, but like, what's the impact like that on a dude growing up?
I'm still, trying to wrap my mind around that, or, in self-reflective kind of ways, picturing through that. So it's not just, like a single parent family, sure, but I have family close by, only child, which again is another, I think, different, especially in terms of, the MLC lifestyle. A lot of people have a brother and sister everywhere, or maybe, it's a ministry family that's all the way stretched out. It's like, no, I have to say no. My dad's not a pastor, my mom's not a teacher. This is, in a way, it's a first generation, though I do have, again, like extended family, certainly in ministry. But yeah, that immediate, just being in Arizona, it's stepping outside of comfort zones, I think, because again, leaving family, leaving the close-knit family, many states away, being an only child, and then, as I mentioned before, right, not really looking for a giant college experience, but no matter where I went, it was going to be so much bigger than grade school, so much bigger than high school. So to step out and then, just be put into a sea of people in that way. When I would come back home and it would just be me, like I'd have to go in the backyard and we'd have dogs. So we had dogs, but it was, that's it. Go in the backyard, entertain, myself, shoot around by myself, but then coming into, even just prepping for ministry, just different, not to mention different weather, different size from Phoenix, big city, to New Ulm, very small, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and when I hear you say that, it makes me think about there's a lot of young men, I think, who never really have that launch moment. One of my favorite authors talks about the idea of he points back to the psalm that talks about a quiver full of arrows is a man with sons in his youth.
Sure. Is
and
that
the
like
idea
127?
of I think so. It's real close to the end of the book.
Yep.
But he takes that then to the next step and says, if your sons are like arrows have a purpose, and the arrow can't achieve its purpose if it's still in the quiver. And so then he takes that then as an analogy for, how do you release your arrows?
Okay.
And the idea that there's a lot of parents and a lot of families where the arrow never gets released, or it's a rough release. And if you've ever done any archery, it's got to be a clean, smooth release, and you need to be prepared, and it needs to be practiced, and it needs to be on point. Otherwise, it's pointless. And so, not saying that young men who have challenges with their families are pointless. I'm not saying that at all. So when, like you said, when you tell your story about, all right, it's time to go, and mom's saying, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly that picture that paints, is this idea of, I've trained you well, I've raised you well, you're ready for this, go. And I've got your back, but it's time for you to go. Mm-hmm. And take that leap to, not even for me, it was like the neighboring state, so they were still up here.
Yep.
Like they saw most of my football games. They were around, during the winter months. I'd see them probably every 2 months in person, that kind of thing. But that's way different when it's from Arizona to Minnesota. That's a hike.
Yeah.
And it's expensive even just to come up here.
Right.
So that's a big leap of faith. Yep. Trusting both, obviously, in the God who holds all things in his hands, but then also trusting in your ability as a parent and saying, I've done what I can. Here you go. It's your turn now. It speaks volumes for your mom.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. It's in the way that she would say it. Yeah, it's like handing me back, basically. Because she'll say, you were the most important thing in my life, like when you came around, and that was huge, and that gave her life purpose. Because again, and I don't really want to dive necessarily into all the details, but my mom's been through a lot of things, and a lot of rough things, and so it's interesting to hear her talk in that way, but then that kind of sets the stage to say, okay, now she's very comfortable, just like putting me back, so to speak. And giving me an opportunity to get out here and be so involved and get on the front lines and get into the battleground of just ministry, which she now takes in part in tuning in, especially with everything that's going on right now. A lot of people are doing that, and she's very faithful in just checking in, and she'll send me texts, and she'll be like, I really liked your message from evening chapel, and it's just what I needed to hear. And so she still supports from afar, and we still get the chance to, talk quite a bit. But you're right, just from stepping into college, and it got reduced down to Christmas and spring break. and then went over to seminary, and it got reduced to just Christmas. And then it came to vicar year, and it's like, well, I'm not gonna be home for Christmas because vicar we have to do stuff during the Christmas year. Like we're all in. We're working right alongside pastor, that way. So then it was just a little bit deferred and a little bit delayed, and now just getting into that first call and still coming into my own. Like everything is just another huge step up from college to SEM to now being out in the real world. Even though it brings me right back to college, but with a new perspective. And now, to borrow from a thing that my aunt has told me, like she's stepped in and she said, the things that you've seen and the things that you've gone through, that's going to help someone else. Like you're going to be able to somewhere, sometime, and God knows when, in your ministry, that's going to become relevant. And you're going to be able to step alongside, right, and be right there with somebody else in their struggles, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So you were talking a little bit about, first of all, right now I just want to give your mom a giant hug. If she was here, I'd be giving her a giant hug.
That'd be awesome.
So you talked a little bit about, you mentioned a couple times how often you do chapel. You do chapel a lot.
Yep.
And it's part of the job.
Yeah.
And you and Hans both do a fantastic job.
Well, thanks.
Not that there's ever tutors that don't necessarily do a good job, like they normally do a good job.
Yeah.
But you two are particularly gifted in presenting the message, especially for young men and women. I think I'm really lucky to have, really blessed to have you two at this moment. Obviously, the Lord puts the right people at the right place, but you guys really fit the role very, very well, and it's cool to see. So what's your process when it's time to do chapel? Because it's hard. I mean, it's one thing to write a sermon every week.
Yeah.
It's another thing to be doing like 3 chapel services and then sometimes church too. So
Sure. Yeah. No, the chapel experience, I think that is something that's really cool about MLC. So I'll get an opportunity to kind of look in advance. I keep an eye on that. I see, okay, here's the text. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to dive into it right away. Usually
it's an assigned text, like they assign it to you.
Yeah, for evening chapel, for sure. So, probably don't get to dive in right away, and it gets a little bit closer, and some of the chapels, end up getting put together just a day or two before in preparation. So I dig in and, just a chance to read it over a few times, right? It's that old idea of preach to yourself first, right? What's firing off in your mind? What are the phrases in the verses that stick out to you? And then as I spend more time with it and as I pray a little bit, over it and just in preparation, and all of a sudden there's a little thematic idea that gets pulled out. And so I say, okay, that's how I want to intro in. And so most of the time it would be like say we're in chapel, I'm going to read the text and then let's go. Let's extrapolate, beyond that. But you're absolutely right. Like it takes a little bit of time to consider the audience and consider what's on the hearts of college students. And amazing blessing of being a tutor is that you're really not that far removed. You're far removed enough where they look up to you and they say, hey, I want to be there someday, or I want to, have this kind of confidence, which again is still just growing in me, is nowhere near, what it could be. But to look at that and say, yeah, I want to have that confidence there in speaking about God's word and just being in chapel that way. So it's drawing on in sometimes, old experiences, but also the ministry of presence. Like when you're out there through the week, sometimes that's going to make an appearance. Sometimes what someone has said to you or someone has, confided in you some problem or some pressure, and you're like, okay, I kind of see that in the text here. We can bring that in because God is saying something to them and it's for them. I don't know. Maybe that explains a little bit.
Yeah.
But
do you memorize your sermons or
your
chapels?
Ideally, if I'm being extremely honest, right now it hasn't been necessarily all there. I want to work towards that. And maybe, I could put out whatever excuse I'd like to, just that I'm getting into the job, that it's this first semester, there is a lot on the plate. Yeah. But no, as I get further and further in, like, I really want to, take time to do that, because I do believe in the value of being able to look out and being able to get eye contact and to be comfortable that way. So it's a goal that I'm working back towards to get to that point. Yeah.
You hear that? Yep. The heater just kicked out in the background
there.
Yep. What's your favorite part of being a tutor so far?
Favorite part, okay, so it's probably cliche, but it's getting to know the college kids, right? The ones that are here now. Because it is pretty much an entirely new crop. There's a few people, whether it be fifth years or whether it be people who have, spent some time and then come back, like, okay, I know them, right? Like, yeah, okay, we're, reconnecting in that way, certainly. But that's few and far between. So many new faces. And I'm still trying to get everyone's name down, Like, I want to be able to greet you and say your name and, ask a little bit about you and know a little bit about you, going forward. But it's getting to know them because they have, again, their own background, right, that they're coming into. They have their own hopes and dreams and goals as they're looking ahead towards ministry. And you get a little chance to kind of step inside, what's this upcoming generation, how are they viewing things? And that's extremely important because they're part of the church. And if we're going, and Lord willing, if I, serve in a church, specifically, a couple of years down the road, and Lord willing for a long time, I don't want to lose sight of that. I don't want to lose sight of that fact that every generation, right, this is still the body of Christ. This is still the family of believers as a whole, and they are a part of the church. And so everyone's voice, needs that space, needs that opportunity, to be heard. And so now I'm getting it at the ground level right here, with young people. And I think that gets increasingly harder if you're a pastor and you go out through your ministry, because you start to get comfortable and you start to look at the younger generation. You say, look, here are all the, issues in the world and America, and it's going downhill, because I remember back in my day, growing up. No. I kind of want to fight against that a little bit. I want to be able to maintain perspective, and so now I get the chance to do that right at the beginning. So I really do enjoy that. And like, this ministry, obviously it revolves around people, and it's people who want to be there for other people. So yeah.
Well, I was thinking about, in regards to that whole idea of this generation and that kind of stuff, I was over the last 2 weeks, our Hebrew professor had us do like an oral reading. And so each of us went to Professor Nass's room, his office, like one at a time, and so you spend about 2 minutes reading, and he gives you a little bit of feedback, and then he spent the next 10, for me it was like 20. I sorry to the dude that was behind me. I did a lot of talking, but I'm good at that. I'm good at talking a lot. Anyway, so he just sat there and we talked for me, it was 20 minutes. I know for a bunch of other guys, it was like 15, 20 minutes. For some, it was more like 10. But when it was all over, he in class one day just said, it's so often I hear, on the radio or in books and all over the place, you hear things about, this generation is different than any other, and how technology has changed kids, and things just aren't the same as then. Things have forever changed. He said, but I sit here and I talk to all of you, and whether it's the concerns that you have, the issues that you face, the things you're excited about, the things that make you nervous or give you stress, and as I'm sitting here listening to all of you talk about these things, I can't help but think this is just like my classmates and I were 40 years ago. It's the same conversations, it's the same concerns, it's the same desires, it's the same excitement, it's the same things that we're interested in. It's our same things that make us stressed. And Solomon said, "There's nothing new under the sun." Right? You can search everything out, seek everything out. Things will change, seasons change, but there's nothing new. And I think that's an important thing to remember a lot of times. You know? And there's nothing. I was even talking about some of the challenges you were talking about before. Like, there is nothing new, And so there is always going to be someone who can speak to it. There's going to be somebody who can work through it with you and that kind of thing. But now that was pretty powerful. That especially particularly a man who's seen so many young men go through his classroom is saying, you're pretty much just like everybody else. But then he followed it up with, but that doesn't sell very many books. So if you want to be on the bestseller list, you better say kids these days, But yeah, it gave me a lot of comfort.
Sure.
It gave me a lot of peace too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about how much you love sports growing up, and I know that was on your list of things that you enjoy.
Right.
And you're coaching. What are you coaching right now?
Yeah. So earlier in the year, I was working with the cross country team, and that's something that I did when I was here. So fun to be a part of that crew. I think it's a sport that is small, and it's relatively unpopular, and a lot of people, bag on running because they're like, I don't get it.
Because running is hard.
Right.
I don't want to
understand.
run.
Yeah.
I like doing other things that are hard.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. Yep.
When you weigh 250 pounds, running is hard.
Yeah. So I know. But, but with that, it's a close-knit group. Maybe because of that. Maybe just because, it's just unique individuals and ones that appreciate, running in that way. And so you do end up getting close, and, it's not so much for the fanfare. It's not so much because it brings in the big crowds. But it becomes more than just your personal achievements. So cross country is cool in that way. Very happy to be involved that way. Right now, working with women's basketball, and basketball really is my number one, far and away. So this has been so much fun. Stepping in, again, every coaching opportunity, I get to know these people so well. Before practice and after practice and even during practice, as you start to see, personalities come out, as you start to see strengths, as you start to see what they, can work on. And in that way, they'll really be looking, towards you or towards the coaches. And, so early on, important to establish that trust, important to, get to know them so that it opens them up a little bit. And then, what I love to do from a coaching aspect is really the one-on-one. That's why I'm thankful I'm the assistant coach. Because head coach Garish, he's addressing the entire group, and he's very well put together. He's been doing it for a number of years. He knows what he wants to accomplish, and he can inspire the entire crew, right? To put forward all of that effort. And so for me, it's so much fun to step in and do kind of the one-on-one, right? Like I'm taking it in and I'm observing these details, and I see something, I see how the play develops. And then as, they step out and new players come in, to fill in the drill, I can go over to them and I can, encourage them, or I can say, hey, this was what was really good. Like, great pass there. So glad you saw that. Or, when you have that space, take that shot, whatever it might be. It's just a one-on-one, and to work with them, and I think they really do, appreciate that. And that's just kind of a lane that I like to fill. So that's what I got going on right now. And then tennis in the spring. So hand in everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the life of a tutor.
And so you ran cross country at MLC.
Yes.
Did you play basketball at MLC?
And yeah, I neglected to
did
say
you play
that.
tennis or no?
No, I did not do tennis. That would be the new one. Yep,
Okay.
Cross country and basketball. I was very glad to have the spring off. During college years.
No, for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
So that was one of my favorite parts of being a collegiate athlete was the more like being I loved playing football.
Sure.
But it was just as much like being in the weight room with the guys and working out, like doing life together was just as big of a deal for me as the actual like playing was.
No, absolutely. I mean, some of my the friends that I keep in touch with today belong to the cross country team, the basketball team. I mean, there's some of the guys that you just stick with, that you're spending time outside of your sport.
Yeah, my best friends in the world are both guys I played MLC football with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good dudes, man.
Yeah. No, those are fun times. I mean, that's definitely some big memories just from college. The respective teams. Well,
and there's been some debate about whether or not like a college ministry should have a big athletic program, and whether or not it should be something that gets a lot of attention and a lot of time. Obviously it's something you find very valuable, but something I find very valuable.
Yeah.
What is it that gives athletics such value to specifically in our setting of young Christian men and women,
Sure.
particularly on this podcast, particularly Christian men.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think the first thing is that we're probably looking at a lot of potential coaches.
I never thought about that.
Just inside of, our grade schools or our high schools. Eventually they're going to, be on the other side. And so to have, again, it's all about, meeting people where they're at. And if you've walked in those shoes before, how much more experience, right, do you then have to draw from where you're like, okay, now I get the chance to lead kids in this way. And, it's part of following kind of that way. And that doesn't mean necessarily that every athlete is going to be a coach. Okay. No big deal if you're not. But a lot of them will. A lot of them will get that opportunity. And so to have it modeled in a way, but also to go through the sport themselves, even if that's not the sport that they're going to coach later on, that's still going to help them. So I think that's one thing. But then just to, going through the sport, it's also time management. Like, if you're involved in a sport, that's great. But you're going to have to have an understanding of who you are, know how you study, and then take all of that into account. A significant time or portion of your day is consumed with athletics, and that's a good thing. But then you have to be willing to commit, right? And that's something that you learn over time. You say, I am going to commit. I'm going to do this, and then, it's going to be right to dinner, and then we've got evening chapel, and then I got to hunker down in the library, right? Just spend however many hours it takes, and then if I'm, looking out for myself, probably need to go to bed after that, but usually you spend time just chatting with friends.
Yep.
Maybe till midnight or 1. And that's all good, because they get the chance to navigate that for themselves. They get the chance to experiment with their schedule themselves. And then just doing the sport you talked about, lifelong, friends. And the health benefits, obviously, too. All of that's wrapped in. And so I say sports, pretty closely connected to ministry. Kind of like any other extracurricular. It's another chance to make well-rounded professionals.
That's good. Yeah. What about the sport itself? Like you dug into basketball quite a bit. Like you said, that's your thing.
Right.
I think cross country, that's such an easy run the race, right?
Yes.
I know it's cliche, but it's
not
also
easy.
Oh, it's definitely not easy. It's definitely not easy. But the connection of to a Christian life,
right,
that's incredibly
because the Bible,
it's so easily parallels.
Yeah, I mean, and you can go to verses about that. And
often
they're overused in cross country devotions, and you're like, well, let's talk about some other verses.
Can we
Everyone's
talk about,
heard this.
Something else.
No, and this team I think felt that especially, but no. Still
so who was leading all those devotions?
Well, I mean, I had one.
Oh, you had one. Okay,
I had one. I did something different. Yeah.
Does the team do their own devotions?
Yeah.
Oh,
so the
awesome.
guys on the team will step up, and so we had them on every Monday, and so we just had a schedule laid out, and for as many Mondays as we had, not as many this year, given the circumstances. So we had our older guys, especially. Usually it would go through the whole team, but we had our older guys and Coach Weinkoff and then myself take a Monday. So, and that's really neat. Gives them a chance to get up front, gives them a chance to address the group, gives them a chance to pick out a text, some verses that are important to them, that they really appreciate, gives them a chance to make those applications, to the team at that time. So that's one of the really cool aspects of sports at MLC.
And I had forgotten about that, but we did that for football too.
Sure.
I don't know. I haven't been in any football stuff with new coaches and everything.
Yep.
But I completely forgot about that. But we definitely did that too.
Okay.
Which is it's huge. It's such a big deal. To take. You only get so many hours together as a team, right? And to take, even if it's just 5-8 minutes at the end of every practice and do that devotion, have that time together, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And to take on that leadership of, I'm going to lead the men around me, or women around me,
Either way.
in devotion. It's a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's formative that way. But you were kind of getting into basketball, right? And
so what about
connection.
First of all, what makes you love? Why is basketball the thing, man?
Well, okay. You said my mom should have, maybe named me Timothy, right? For those connections.
Tim Hardaway?
But no. But my name is Jordan. And it's literally drawn. Yes,
okay.
It's exactly what you would think. It is. It's from MJ. I mean, I was born in 93. And so the Phoenix Suns playing the Chicago Bulls in the 93 finals. And obviously the Suns did not win. No, because MJ was still, running through and those three-peats and getting more of his rings there.
Sorry, Charles.
Yeah.
Charles Barkley.
Yeah,
Sorry,
right,
bro.
Right. Yep. So, but I mean, that is how I got my name. So, it came from MJ. And, basketball was always, my dad, for what it's worth, I mean, he was a point guard in college ball. And my mom played as well, in high school. And so she kind of put a basketball into my hands, from early on. Just one of those little ones. And, that little white backboard and the red rim.
Yeah.
Just the thing that it seemed everybody had, growing up in the 90s. Yeah. Yep. So
if you touched it too hard, it would like fall over the floor.
Right.
Everybody's done a dunk contest on that thing at least a few times.
Yes, even through grade school.
Oh yeah, and I remember you just start setting it on stuff. So then you set it on the dining room table, and you can dunk on that. But you're
still going. I remember doing that with friends, and it would be in the garage, and we had, and his
at
parents
like
would
15
take out.
and 16 years old.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, clear it out, and we're like, all right, here we go, just making things up. So started out that way, and basketball just became, a part of life. It became that sport that I gravitated to. And then when we moved in with Grandma, there was a whole like half court setup, legit one in the backyard. So I'd spend all my time, just shooting around. So it became a love then, through high school and then college. Yeah, I wanted to give it that shot. And really, I was like the last guy to make the team. Because there were a few cuts, and Coach even talked with me, and he said, "Yeah, I decided to let, this guy go, and so you're in, and I felt it too. I don't know, maybe I was pretty, nervous coming in, and a lot of things were new. College was new, Minnesota was new, and basketball at that level was new. So even just my growth. Personally, my growth in basketball from freshman year to senior year, huge differences. But yeah, so my love was fostered that way. I'm all in on basketball. I'm going to play it as long as I can, for as many years as I can, hoping the body keeps up to some extent with that.
Yeah, that's a real thing. Once you get to like your junior year of college, it's like I just hope my body can hold on for another year.
Well, especially for football. Man. I mean, you're taking more impact.
Dude, it took me for sure like a legitimate 2 years to like undo all the damage football did. Like going to the chiropractor twice a week.
Yeah.
Like the way I was working out, obviously is going to change once you're done playing football. But like it turned like the stretching, the body work that I had to do. It took like 2-3 years to get back, and then just to feel normal. To feel like I was 24.
Sure.
And then like when I started working out again hard, like now I'm big into powerlifting and that kind of stuff. I
didn't know that.
Well, I shouldn't say I'm big into powerlifting because I don't compete at all. But it's what I really enjoy, right?
Yeah.
And I just love lifting big heavy weights, and I like being a big dude. Like I just want to always be a big dude.
All right.
But when I started getting kind of back into that and pushing myself again, and all of a sudden, like, more stuff started popping up. Like, I didn't know I had these issues, and we gotta get those addressed then. Like, it took so long to undo the damage football did, and yet I wouldn't trade a single second.
Right.
Wouldn't trade a single second.
Yep.
And that, I honestly, I think that kind of actually is a case for football, maybe, even football. Most high schoolers aren't experiencing that. But like college ball, you're going to experience. Everybody's going to experience that to some point. But I would say that might even be a case for, collegiate athletics, is that when you're done at, 22, like, yeah, you're going to feel like you're 30 instead of 22 for a little while. But if you take care of yourself, you even mentioned the health aspect of it.
Yeah.
If you're taking care of yourself throughout college, and then you take care of yourself once you're done, you still are young enough and resilient enough to bounce back.
Yeah.
It's just wear and tear.
I know. Yeah. And I've had to remind myself that I'm really not that old. you know, when I'm trying to keep up with the current college guys. Like I'll play, you know, like an after school ball just to get out there again. And that's so much fun. But you start to realize, you know,
those 18-year-olds can run, man.
Yeah. Well, we were there once, though.
Yep, we were. Well, I was never running, but
well, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing is because my sport of choice is strength sports.
Yeah.
I'm like hitting my peak right now. Like
Okay.
I'm not even to my peak yet.
Sure.
And so that's kind of another kind of. I mean, it's just different sports and the way your body develops is different. I'm working on the old man strength right now.
Okay.
Like getting there.
Right.
Someday I'll have old man strength, but I gotta do the work now, so I've got it.
There you go. No, I think you can do it.
But yeah, we are a lot younger than we think sometimes.
Yeah.
It's easy to think you're old until you know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's such a big thing, I think, for a lot of the young guys that are on campus. And you are an authority. I'm not an authority figure on campus, but you are. But on both sides of it, I think there's a lot of guys who are like, 19, 20, and they look at us almost as like old guys,
Right.
And I kind of wish, I don't know how to communicate it to them, but it's like, hey man, like this is 5 years down the road for you.
I know.
This isn't that far away.
No, I kind of struggle with that too. Maybe it's not so much struggle, but I try to find ways to essentially kind of close the gap, and not in a way that it forfeits any of the authority or any of the respect, right? Because you do have to be careful, and there are some lines that you are careful not to cross, certainly. And I'm mindful and I think about that. But at the same time, what I'm trying to get at really is to say, what are actual accessible ways to close that gap a little bit, to spend time with guys so that they know, you're not lording things over them, that you don't think of yourself as so much higher, than they are, but you can actually get down on their level. And a point when they realize, oh yeah, sure, he's older than me, but he's really not that far removed. Like he understands the culture. He understands, the current trends. He understands what's going on in music and sports, and I can relate to him on this level. And that's what I like. And that's those connections that I like to make, because for me, I don't know that I'm necessarily the most formal guy, I'm not a wild and crazy guy by any means, but, not so formal in the sense of, I'll, dress up for chapel and dress up for work in the sense of, going in to teach for sure. But in a lot of the off hours, I kind of just dress down a little bit. And, I'm afraid at the beginning of the year, like people don't even know. Do they know I'm tutor? Do they think I'm maybe a guy who's
thought
coming
I was
back?
Tutor.
Yeah, right. Like, oh, am I just the senior that they don't know about? But I think stuff like that is important, to kind of let them into your life a little bit that way. And even in the classroom, right? I think that can be accomplished. I think you can give little glimpses to where you're down on their level, and that's not demeaning at all. But it's a means of connection.
Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest separator a lot of times is the real life experience side of things, like
Sure.
Not necessarily. A lot of times when you hear those words like real life experience, it is kind of a lording it over you type of thing, like, well, you don't know what it's like, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there is a legitimate, like, your perspective changes when you start seeing some things, and good things, bad things, just like seeing the way the world is, it does change your perspective a lot. And I think some of the things that college kids push back on a lot of times, those are like, that means a lot to us because we've seen why it's important.
Right.
Like they're not just blowing hot air out into the world when authority figures say, like, don't do this, be careful with that.
Yeah.
And we've kind of lived and seen some of that, I
sure.
think. And that is it's something that a lot of older people and a lot of, again, authority figures working with young people struggle to communicate that. And sometimes it turns into like, well, Jesus says, like, well, that might not be wrong, but it's hard to make that connection as a young person, like,
yeah,
Jesus says it's wrong, so it's wrong. And you go, why? And that's a good question to ask. It's a question you should be asking. Why does Scripture, discourage it? Why do the people around me who are in charge discourage it? And a lot of times it's hard to see that unless you've walked it or know somebody who has walked it.
Sure. And that could accidentally turn like what you're probably intending to be gospel motivation, and all of a sudden it turns into a little bit more law motivation, and it gets twisted, right? Even if it is well-meaning. They want a little bit more depth. And it's interesting just getting into that conversation, because talking about life experiences, and sometimes I feel like those are the kinds of questions that I get most often, right? Like they want to know, like I'm surprised actually how many guys ask me about Vicar Year, right? Because it's something that they're looking forward to. They're like, well, I want to get there someday. So tell me, how was it for you? So sometimes they just open that door. And they're like, yeah, I do want to hear about your life experiences. But you're right, when it comes around to the other side, and they're saying, and whether that be discipline, or something's going not the, way that you want it to, certainly, as dorm supervisor, and you got to step in. Right. But there's no, like, it's worthwhile to take the time and talk things through with them. And it might not be right there and then, right? Especially if it's a little touchy, if there's a bigger issue at hand, you might just say, hey, I'm going to step away from it for the night, but we're going to come back. We'll talk about this later. And sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. But point being, get back to them, and spend that time and entertain questions and actually be a listener first before you, go out and you share something that is worthwhile, and have that be grounded in Scripture, and include any applicable life experiences, not to take away from whatever they're going through or whatever you're trying to address in their life, but just as means to make those connections.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your favorite hooks to make those connections? You know what I mean? Like, do you have tools in your tool belt that you're like, I know I can usually get this?
What's an example? What do you think?
Like when I'm trying to make a connection with like one of the kids in my classroom.
Okay.
A lot of times, so I love listening to music. I have a very eclectic taste.
Yes.
And so at the beginning of a class in my classroom,
yep,
I'll start playing music that I like, and a lot of times like new music that I like,
sure,
or that I'm discovering, or even like Christian music that isn't like I'm not a huge fan of worship music, so I like to find good. A lot of times it's like one song that an artist puts out where they talk about their faith or whatever.
Okay.
And start playing those, and the kids start asking about it, and that opens up a conversation. This is why I like it. This is why, blah, blah, blah. Nice. And all of a sudden we're talking about music, and they're giving me song suggestions, and that kind of thing gives you a connection, right?
Absolutely.
Or like when we moved I love wearing cowboy boots. When I was a kid, I always wanted to wear cowboy boots.
Okay.
And we never had, I had, when I was real young, there was, somebody gave my parents a pair of cowboy boots to put in like in a dress-up bin, and my feet were just a little too big for them. Like I was like 8, and the boots were probably for like a 6-year-old, and I was a big kid, and I squeezed my feet into them and tried to wear them. My mom wouldn't let me wear them in public, and because they were ridiculous and tiny, right?
Yeah.
But I always wanted cowboy boots. I always loved cowboy movies, all that. So when I had a job of my own and was a professional, I went out and bought a pair of cowboy boots, and I didn't wear them that often when I was in Milwaukee. Like I just wear them for fun because they're fun, you know. And then I've got the ones with like a good work boot sole on the bottom. Okay. So I would wear them on like snowy days and things like that when I didn't want to mess up my nice shoes. But otherwise, I just wore them when I wanted to relax and have some fun, right? But now that I'm in New Ulm and it's a very rural setting, like of my 60 kids, I want to say between 15 and 20 of them are like legit farm kids. A lot of country kids, that kind of thing. And I wear my cowboy boots almost every day, and like it makes that connection with them. I always wear my John Deere belt buckle anyway because it's a family heirloom. But like those kinds of things, it sounds silly and like surface level, but it makes that connection, And even with like the janitors, like it makes you start having those conversations,
right?
And it brings things up. So like they. I've never done a harvest in my life, but I worked for a John Deere dealership, and I know the equipment, like I know the process, all that kind of stuff. And so then when you have some kid who doesn't have their homework done, and he's talking about how tired he is because he was out in the field all night with his dad, you can like, oh man, I know the feeling. Like, I understand. And they're like, really? And you start talking. All of a sudden, you got a connection, right? And you got them.
Sure.
So what
Sure.
are your favorite hooks?
Yeah. Well, definitely music, right? And we could go down that avenue if you want to. I mean, yeah, I'm all in for that. So that's a great one.
You're gonna give away all your secrets. The dudes in the dorms are gonna be like, Tutor's trying to get to know me. He's asking me.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. No.
So plug your ears, Concord guys.
Yep. So yeah, that. Here, I mean, I get a chance to talk with the guys that are more used to city, right? Like that's a perspective that I bring in, and so I can commiserate in some ways. The guys that just yearn for that kind of life, or maybe that pace, or just the sheer amount of people, the opportunities, to go and be around others and all the different activities, that are just available. And so that's kind of a big thing. I mean, that's happened recently, really. Just thinking back to the past couple of days, kind of banked on that. They think that's cool, to say, sure, I understand that. I lived through that as Phoenix and everything. So that would be one. Wow. Beyond that, it's an interesting conversation.
I mean, you didn't bring it up, but I would guess sports is a big one.
Well, right.
I mean, because you're in there, you're watching it, you love it.
Yep.
The finals just happened.
Yeah. Right. I know. No,
we have the Lakers.
I have like a group chat really with some of the guys, and okay, so they're the RAs, but we'll talk about that, or we'll meet up, we'll go to late night and just have any sort of talk like that, and that's kind of a lead in, and then it can be whatever. It could be about the week, it could be about deeper stuff, it could be scriptural questions, It just then it really does branch out.
Well, going back to your ministry by presence, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're present, they're comfortable, and when you're comfortable, it's a lot easier to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so so you just have to spend a little bit of time, a little bit here, a little bit there, and before you even know it, you don't even have to be like intentionally looking for that, but it just kind of naturally develops.
Yeah. So what is on your iPod right now?
Whew. Well,
what's Tutor Ulhorn listening to?
Yes. No iPod. I'm a Spotify guy for sure.
Jeez, I knew there was something about
actually,
you, man.
well, I mean, okay, but that's a normal thing. The thing that's not normal is that I'm actually a CD guy, and I feel like nobody, does those anymore, because either it's all digital or there's the retro. Everyone's bringing back vinyl, and I find myself strangely in between. But I have like over 200 CDs, and the great thing is that the car that's parked outside, so this is my first car, and I've had it for a number of years now, and I really want it to keep going because I love it so much. Holly, but she's
parked right next to Susan.
There you go. And she's got a 6-disc CD changer.
Oh, nice.
Perfect for road trips. So I plan it out, and usually I bring 6 for the way over, and and then I come back and I've got 6 on the way back. And it just automatically, rotates through. So like CDs are huge for me. And then Spotify helps me get a pulse on what's new, what's the new stuff that's coming out. So if we're talking music taste, again, it's all over the board. I mean, you said you're kind of there too. So let's start just on the Christian level, okay? Because again, I don't consider myself to really, be that deep into specifically, like Christian bands and Christian music, like I'm listening to a lot more. But there's a few, I think, so for me, biggest one would be King's Kaleidoscope. Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar at all.
No. Okay.
I've seen the name, but I've never actually listened to the music.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No, I appreciate that. So you should check out their most recent album, Zeal. I think it actually gets better the further that you get into it. I like the second half of that album even more than the first. And then Zion. So that's a song by them. And there's a live YouTube video of that one, and that might be one of my favorite songs from them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
King's Kaleidoscope?
King's Kaleidoscope.
Okay.
Yep. So and for you, I mean, you're on the Christian worship, Christian
so
fan
like I said,
level?
I'm not a huge fan of worship music.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to listen to like K-Love a lot when I was in Milwaukee, and you can't really get that stuff out here. It's small town radio.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of selection.
Sure.
The radio in my truck didn't work anyway. So. Shout out to Cameron Schrader, introduced me to. I've listened to this song like on loop for 3 or 4 days now. It's the one that was on when you were when you came in.
Oh, yeah.
It's Judah from Judah and the Lions, or Judah and the Lion.
Yep.
So just Judah put out a song recently, a single. There we go.
Yep.
Just called Just 'Cause He Does, right? Or because He Does.
Okay.
And the whole idea is Jesus loves me just 'cause He does. He loves me because He does.
Thanking.
And
truly on
dude,
grace.
it is unbelievable. It is so good.
Yeah.
But I also do a lot of Rhett Walker, and kind of those Nashville rock, more kind of stuff. A little bit indie rock Christian stuff, a little bit more.
Yep. Gotcha.
A few years ago, I listened to a lot of the Digital Age and Crowder. And the only reason I'm not listening to them as much is that they haven't put out a lot of new stuff.
Gotcha.
So you kind of get tired of the old stuff a little bit. And you got to take a break. But yeah, Rhett Walker, Crowder, Digital Age. And the Digital Age is David Crowder's old band. So when it was the David Crowder band, he went solo, and he's doing more like folk kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like more Nashville rock.
Yep.
And they kind of went in the opposite direction. They're doing more of the digital stuff, which that's why I call it the Digital Age. But very similar vibes as far as like the way they do their music. So when I'm just gonna listen to Christian music, I guess that kind of stuff. I have been listening to more like Southern gospel and bluegrass stuff lately. And I don't know. I'm not really sure why. But I don't know. I just kind of dig it.
Yeah.
So Stephen Curtis Chapman put out one recently. Who's the country singer? Josh Turner put one out a couple of years ago.
Josh Turner.
And that voice.
Great.
But
so good.
So good. I can't remember the name of his album, but it's just a really good like Southern gospel album. And then I spent the last 6 years in inner city Milwaukee, and the church I was at most recently, I actually sang in a gospel choir and everything. So I do listen to a fair amount of gospel music.
Nice.
So Tasha Cobbs Leonard is good stuff.
All right.
And usually pretty sound doctrinally. Travis Green the same way.
Okay.
And he doesn't do as much. A lot of times gospel musicians will preach a lot while they're doing their performance. He doesn't do as much of that. And so you kind of like his church. There are definitely some doctrinal issues there, but the music itself is pretty solid.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy those two right now in particular.
Okay.
Donnie McClurkin, some of his it's corny gospel music, but it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I don't. It's like I said, really eclectic. And I'm not really into like worship music or like Christian hits of the day, just because they're all kind of the same. And that's the common complaint, and it's also it's really valuable too, is that it's easy to recognize, you know what to expect, and it's meant to be a worship experience, and so it is good. I mean, a lot of hymns sound pretty much the same too, for the same reasons,
Yeah.
But I'm more into the contemporary Christian stuff that isn't necessarily worship stuff.
Yeah. No, and I get that. And I think that's why I like King's Kaleidoscope. Like it steps outside of the box a little bit. And so like the album I mentioned, and they have, 3 songs, but really they're all tied together. They're kind of in a unit. It's that way on YouTube for the video as well, which is a cool video. I'll just mention that to you afterwards. But like the lines that they write are creative and bringing forward some real truths and just expressing it in a different way. Because again, those common complaints of Christian music, that's basically what kind of pushed it to the side for me. And I said, I like the Christian influence that sneaks into every other genre, and I'll seek that out, or I'll pick that up in artists, and I'll see them, and, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a Christian or outright Christian, but they're entertaining some of those thoughts, and I think that's valuable too, to see that in music. So let's take a few steps back, and I'm just gonna run through the musical progression.
What did you think of Kanye's gospel album?
The gospel album, yeah. So man, it's polarizing.
It is.
It is. It's like, man, some of these I really love. And in fact, God Is, that's my favorite
It's
track.
unbelievable.
That's my favorite
it's
one.
so good.
I had it on repeat
and Kenny
for
G
so long.
in the background and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like the word he's used in a lot of interviews is worshipful. And there is no, I mean, I know it's a made up word, but it's exactly the right word for it. It is so, the whole album is good.
Yeah.
The whole album is good.
Right. There are definitely songs on there that I just skip through.
Yeah.
But what I took from it was, an interesting look into like Kanye's development in that sense. And what's interesting is that I think for a lot of people, they think this is a totally new lane for him, and I don't think that's the case.
Not.
I don't think that's true at all. I think it's like a rediscovery, and in fact, like an impassioned. Like all of a sudden he is saying, "Yeah, this is everything." So I'm actually going to do that, and he's a big enough guy that he can take those risks, and not necessarily that he's thinking about it as a risk. I don't imagine that he does. I think he's just trying to be true to himself, as I'm sure he was through all of his albums. But right, there were little glimpses and there were little bits of pieces and, went this way and that way and every way. But that's kind of cool, to see that and now to have him wrapped around and seemingly very focused, on putting out this message and being unafraid, to talk about his Savior that way. So there are definitely a few songs on that I took and I was like, these ones are great and I'm going to spam them and I'm going to listen to them a lot. But yeah, I've stepped away from it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I haven't listened to it as much, again, because you can only listen to something so many times before it starts to be old.
Sure, unless it's a personal classic for you.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Collision Course by Linkin Park. Never gets old, man. Could listen to it over and over and over again.
Hey, that's your thing.
Like Jay-Z and Linkin Park, man. So good. Not that I'm it's just so good, man.
Okay.
But so just a little bit more time on Kanye there. Like some of the thing that bothered me the most about that whole thing was there were so many people that dismissed it, and even people that were dogging it. Like before they never listened to it, and they just like said stuff that they heard other people saying and things like that, and they're really digging into like just digging their heels in on rejecting it outright without ever. And I honestly really disappointed with a lot of people that I respect for not even giving it like it's one thing to ignore it. Like I would have rather had them ignore it than treat it the way that they did. And like the best example of that was Closed on Sunday. Like the song is about the idea of my family and I are setting aside Sundays as a Sabbath, and whatever. But like there was so much.
It's the Chick-fil-A song to everybody else.
I know, right? and so there was like this rumor. There was this thing going around talking about like how the song was about he and his wife don't have sex on Sundays. It's like, where are you getting that from?
I had never even heard that. That's
It was like
crazy.
It was like and he like publicly talked about like how this is not what the song's about, and everybody's like, oh, he's denying it too hard. It's like, look at the words of the song. Where does it say anything about this, And the other one is, I don't remember the name of the song, but the one where he's talking about like arguing with his dad. It's like he's talking about prayer. He's talking to his follow God.
Yep.
Like he's talking about praying. So when he says, like, I talk to my dad, he tells me to do something, and I come back to my dad and try and tell him what to do. He's not talking about his dad. He's talking about God. And it's this relationship and this struggle going back and forth. And at the end, he's like screaming like, ah, right? It's like, it's that frustration of I'm just trying to be righteous and I just can't do it. And if you take it just face value as his intention of this is what he was trying to present, most of it is just spot on and killer, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm with you there.
Anyway, so your musical rundown, man. What are you listening to?
Well, I mean, so like I grew up on country. So like I have country roots, I guess, if you want to talk about Tim McGraw and Toby Keith, Dierks Bentley, Billy Currington, Josh Turner, like you said.
So good.
So like all of that's in the background, and then as far as modern country, I really Zach Brown band, that's about as modern as I get. Or Thomas Rhett. Those two, for sure. And whatever the aforementioned ones, if they're still putting out stuff, yeah, I'll key in. But now country's mostly a summer thing for me. I just kind of fit into that stereotype. I'm like, hey, it sounds better in the summer, with the windows down, and especially being here in the Midwest. I think that's really what drives me to do that. But, so, that's not so much in the picture, really, at all. Huge R&B guy. R&B, soul music. And that could be from the big artists all the way down to a lot of ones that if I would name them, not that many people are going to, really, pick up on that or say like, oh, yeah, I listen to him or her quite often. One example of that would be The Weeknd. He's a huge, star now. That wasn't always the case. And so, I have to claim that as like a day one, back, was cool. Before he was cool, before he was super popular and like the #1 streamed artist on Spotify, kind of keying into the whole thing, the entire discography. It's like your Weeknd and Frank Ocean and, James Blake, personal favorite, So that kind of style, I like some of the, folk music, I guess. I struggle to put a strict definition on it, but, Hozier.
Okay.
Like Hozier.
Okay.
A little bit of that vibe, because again, what I appreciate there is like, it's got the guitar backing, and I'm not a huge, rock guy by any means, or like guitar heavy bands. I'm starting to come around a little bit that way, but Hozier's like lyricism, and, especially I think both of his albums really are kind of dark, but it's, it's neat to see, the themes that he puts in, and there's some religious, but that's what like I was talking about earlier. Like it's religious, but he's questioning, he's toying around with it, he's bringing in different concepts that way, but I don't think he's there with it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I find that so intriguing. I find it so like it's rich, just in the depth that's there musically.
Well, it's an honest picture
lyrically.
of what's going on,
Absolutely. Yeah, because how many modern artists are just taking the world as they see it and putting it through?
Baby, oh. He's got like 8 songs or 8 words in the entire song.
Oh man,
it's not music, folks.
Yeah, not gonna claim that one. No.
Although, what was the album that came out right after he broke up with his girlfriend? And Sorry was on it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
All those songs. That was a good album.
Okay,
that was a good album.
No, and it's fair. Like we should have guilty pleasures.
That single album. That one's not even a guilty pleasure.
No,
I've got some guilty pleasure music, but that's not it, man. That album was legitimately good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. But
do you listen to rap at all ever?
Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
What
and
kind of
especially
stuff?
Through high school. And I still do now, but that's I've kind of, basically replaced it with the R&B and soul, because I'm keen into more like the vocals, and have an interest in that, and like, tuning in and like singing along with all that. But rap for sure. We've already talked about Kanye, and Kanye used to be my #1 guy, and then really it's Kendrick. Lots of Kendrick. I think each of those albums, every album that he puts out is just masterpiece. You could spend so much time just digging in, and so it's fun to run all of those back. But like your Kendrick and your J. Cole, Kanye still, Mac Miller.
Okay.
Yeah, the late great Mac Miller. That's an interesting ride to listen to. Especially in terms of like artistic growth and like following someone's career. And I wasn't really into Mac Miller at the beginning, I never really hit. But then there's an album that kind of changed it, and I tuned in, and then every album since, and you saw him become more like introspective. And that I found extremely interesting, all the way up to his, passing. It's just, that's what I appreciate about rap actually, is the depth that you can get into. Because there's so many words packed in, but it's like there's not such a hard, tied down structure that I feel like artists feel like they can be open and they can be experimental. And so they'll do that with how it sounds, and they'll do it especially in what they're saying and what they're bringing to the table, or what even just a particular song is about, or how they use an entire metaphor to kind of, flip things on its head. That's what I appreciate, and because it gives just a completely different perspective, but they bring you in. It's like they bring you into their world, and it's fun sometimes just to get consumed.
Well,
in that.
and to speak to that, so I don't really know why, but I really enjoy, what's his name? The guy, Tupac, and Biggie.
There you go.
I really enjoy Tupac and Biggie, and modern rap. I really enjoy NBA YoungBoy and a couple of those other guys.
Wow, that shocks me. A little bit.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So I was introduced to it by my students in Milwaukee.
Sure.
But so that's exactly it. Is the idea of opening up the doors and just letting me into your world, right?
Yeah.
And like that's the culture that I was working with. Like there were 7th and 8th graders who were talking about like this is what life is like for me and for us,
Yeah.
That's a big thing, and it's not always appropriate content, it's not always,
it's rough around the edges.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly, but it's a realistic picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've got such a heart for that ministry and such a heart for those people, and part of it's like a seeking to understand.
Yes.
Part of it legitimately is like. I know it is to an extent an acquired taste, but it's legitimately good music, man.
Oh yeah,
like it's good
that's
music.
I mean, what is a high schooler drawn to? Other than that, and so of course, like I stepped into that realm, and now I'm thinking, I thought Childish Gambino, he kind of drives that line.
Oh yeah,
because he blends.
Chance the Rapper too.
Oh, Chance,
really good,
yeah.
Like really lyrical, really good.
Absolutely,
like
and
great beats.
Right,
yeah.
And Chance was one who also kind of gets ragged on sometimes in the Christian community, because it's like, oh, is he being authentic? I'm like, no, he's stepping into that too.
He is being authentic,
because
he's struggling with
right.
it.
Well, Coloring Book.
How do I,
Coloring Book, like that album.
The whole album is excellent.
It's half and half. Like half of it is just, really going all in on what you would think of more the typical tropes and stereotypes of rap music, and the other half is gospel, but it's interspersed. It's almost like in every other, in just the way that it's put together. And so I fawned over that album for so long, and I was just digging into it because it appealed to all the senses. It was something that I wanted to jam to dance to, and to like get emotional to, and get spiritual with as well. Like it had a little bit of everything there. And so yeah, just like in the way you're talking about Kanye, like same thing with Chance, like give that brother a chance too, just to be brought in and let him, say his piece. And again, okay, is everything doctrinally sound? Is everything going to line up exactly the way that we would want it to? Oh, no, of course not. But he's putting it out there, and that's cool. And so, and he's an artist, and just like Childish Gambino, they blend, in between rap and hip hop and R&B and soul music, and I'm there for it,
yeah.
Well,
and thinking about that perspective even further, like in 99 Problems, Jay-Z has that line, reporter. He's talking about how reporters talk about him, and there's a line in there that goes something to the effect of, they say, all his music is about money, crack, and hoes, and the next line is, he's from the hood, stupid. What kind of facts are those? Like, what do you, like that? And that's exactly the way I feel about like a lot of times Chance the Rapper, even sometimes like NF and some of these guys, who are very like. They're Christians and they talk about their faith and they do all that, but then also some of their music doesn't necessarily line up with that. And
they're living inside the world, right?
They're
presenting it.
Think about the world they live in, where they come from, and that's not to condone bad behavior, but think about where they are and what they're like. The journey has been for these guys, and that duality starts to make sense. And if we're honest with ourselves, there's the same duality in each and every one of us.
Absolutely.
And again, not at all to condone bad behavior, but like when you're alone in your living room at 11 o'clock at night, you can't tell me that there's not a little duality there sometimes,
Sure.
Like when you're driving down the street and, you see a billboard or somebody cuts you off, or when you're spending too much time on your phone scrolling and getting places you probably shouldn't be, you can't tell me there isn't some duality there. Now, I'm not going out and writing rap songs and selling them to the world, but you can't deny that duality either.
Right. Yeah. No, can we afford to give others the grace that we ourselves have received?
Yeah.
It becomes a perspective shift that way. And it's like, how do we approach everything and say, we're not going in and trying to be consumed by it, but it's a seeking to understand. And you put that in a ministry context. And, so just certain artists, I think each person could gravitate towards and just learn a lot from, or just see, I don't know, like the way that I listen to music, and because it's not removed from my life, like it gets applied to my life in one way or another, and it's coming with this spiritual background and trying to see everything that's behind it, and that's where I find incredible value, in making those connections, and having the opportunity to share that with others. Because sometimes you find people who are on the exact same wavelength. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about music, is it's taking your experience and helping you make sense of it. And that's such a big thing that so many people can't get. You ever listen to, so for a little while I was listening to like Christian rap. I shouldn't say for a little while. I started out kind of, I wasn't big into rap at all, except for like Eminem. Which every good white boy listens to Eminem at some point, right? You go through that phase.
Yeah.
But it's not real big into rap, and then I started listening to some of the Christian rap. And trying to get my students into it, and then slowly kind of morphed a little bit. But you ever listen to any of that kind of stuff at all?
I mean, Lecrae. Okay. And NF, like you mentioned, but other than that, not really.
Are you familiar with Flame at all?
Yeah, I've heard the name and probably a few songs, but not much beyond that.
Okay. I'm digging it right now. Actually,
sure.
he just graduated from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis pretty recently.
Oh, wow.
His last album was all about Luther.
Yeah.
And
I think I saw that.
That's not why I'm a fan of his, but that didn't hurt.
I heard about that. No, I saw like a couple internet articles, I think, and kind of scanned through them.
Oh, I think it's Wilted Tulips, I think is what it's called, or something like that.
Sure.
Oh, right. It's good.
I think I remember seeing
it's
that
like
on Twitter.
It's what do you call it when it's not an album? It's
an EP.
EP. Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
Yeah, it's an EP, and it's all about like Lutheran theology, and it's killer. But he's been putting out a whole bunch of singles lately, like the last 5 years, and every single one of his singles is just fire, dude.
Yeah?
They're awesome.
Oh, maybe I'll have to go.
Yeah.
And check that out.
Yeah. I'm really digging on that right now.
Okay. Yeah. No, I suppose, like, not so much kind of that realm necessarily, but again, like some of the ones that I mentioned, like a Kendrick and Cole, and getting into those albums and seeing their perspective, on similar types of things. Like that's, I just really appreciate that. And like just audibly, like from a listening perspective, I like that background. Like I like the energy that it brings. I like the soulfulness. Like that's a huge thing for me. And so that gets all the way into like jazz. And so I'll spend a lot of time digging into like jazz artists as well. Old ones and new ones. Like that's big. And that was something that I listened to as like a young kid as well, like kind of the smooth jazz, it's like the more calming stuff at night, like right before I go to bed, or that's what I'd fall asleep to. And so I think in a way that got ingrained into my musical pattern as well, whatever I'd listen to. So try to get all across the board. I think because I appreciate a range of experiences, I think that's why I like the job, the ministry that I'm doing right now. It's range of experiences. I think all the people that come into my life and that I am interested in getting to know, it's because they have these wide range of experiences, and so I approach music, that same way. Yeah,
it's good. Well, as you said, just bring in perspectives, like movies, bring in perspectives that you don't normally experience.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's fun.
Very cool.
It's fun.
Very cool. So, you are a single man, as am I.
Yes.
So, how does that, like... What's the story there, man?
Yeah, what's up with this? No.
What's wrong with us, bro?
I have the same questions.
There's nothing wrong with us. Just taking our time, finding the right girl.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I've stepped away for a while now. Like, it's been several years, even just being in a relationship. And that's all right, to kind of step away a little bit. Because going through and having those experiences is all super valuable and, like, huge growth from there. And I'm a very different person than I was, say, a couple of years ago or 5 years ago or, what have you. But taking this time, to be, single, and not necessarily that it's entirely intentionally, not
right.
that I wouldn't be
well,
open.
It's like, say, if the right girl walked in the room, I wouldn't have a problem.
Right. Like, there's no, I'm not just like, digging my feet into the ground and saying, hey, I've set apart this amount of time. No, that's not the way it is. But it's good. It's good to kind of be a little bit removed, and because it's things that I think about and I look back to, a lot of experiences in the past and say, what's the growth from there, and to note the changes, and then to note the difference in, like, how I would even approach something like that whole realm of relationships. Like, it's just a different mentality. It's a different mindset now. And so, I don't know. And in a lot of ways, I guess I do tread a little bit more carefully, I definitely don't want to rush into anything, but willing to take some steps, willing to put myself out there, especially in terms of just getting to know someone. Like, yeah, I crave that. Sure. Yeah, that'll be good. And yeah, Lord willing, something will come up.
Yeah. What do you look for? Like, what are your, like, I mean, not that I don't have a list, and I don't think it's really probably healthy to have, like, a list.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the obvious list, like, loves Jesus, wants to have a family, right?
Right.
But, like, beyond that, like, I'm really big on not necessarily having a list. But what are some of the things you look for?
Sure. Well, I mean, okay, so not to take the big ones like what you just said, but there's an aspect to it, of how do you?
Well,
how do you
and say not dismissing those either. Like, as
you
think a little bit,
and not at all.
But because I do think sometimes guys are like, well, she goes to church, or like, she says she loves Jesus. It's like, but what does her spiritual life look like? And that definitely is a thing.
No, exactly. And so I don't know. I hesitate to call it faithfulness, but I guess that's what comes to my mind. But it's more in this sense. It's like, can we talk on a certain level where, yeah, we are digging into those things, and just through those conversations, you get an idea. And again, it's not like you're just looking for a checklist. It's not like there's a bar that you're expecting someone to jump over, because you wouldn't necessarily want that thrown at you either. Like that's too rudimentary. That's too, to think of it something like that. But it's something you'll recognize, I think. It's something that you would pick up just by yourself. Like, it'll become known to you. You're like, oh, that's actually really neat. Like, I appreciate that about her. And it is hard to explain.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But on some level, yeah, just in the way that you can talk about spiritual things or just the deeper things of life, like, that's huge. I appreciate an interest in athletics in the sense of gives us a chance to do something together, and also, that's just an easy connection that way. It's cool, even if as you're thinking down the road and in terms of family and everything, it's like, well, that'd be fun, right? To have something that we can, kind of center around in terms of activities or hobbies, or who knows what, potential kids might be interested in. Maybe it's not sports at all. That's okay too.
That's true.
But, it gives a chance. It gives an avenue for that. How they treat others. And by extension, really, like, who their friends are.
That's a huge thing.
I do think that's huge.
It's
and that's something I picked up during college. I was like, you need to like their friends, whomever you're dating. It's like, that's a big thing, because it's just an indicator. Because people will spend time around, and they're shaped by the ones that they spend time around, but they'll spend time around people that are kind of like-minded, or, maybe similarly experienced. You just kind of, those are the people that you keep in your corner. And so if something feels off, or if you're just not really able to connect, and again, not like you're going to get super deep with everyone, across the board. That's hard to do. But I think there's enough there that it would either signal some red flags or it says, hey, that's a good thing.
Well, it's a huge value statement. The people you choose to be with, the things you choose to spend your time and energy on is a huge value statement. And like those things aren't going to change over the next 50, 60 years.
Right.
You know, like obviously some things can change. But like those are markers for the way life is going to go together, you know?
Yeah.
Those are big things for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so what we got to ask everybody on this show, because it is what it is, man. 2 questions. If you go back and talk to your 18-year-old self for like 5 minutes, what would you say? My favorite answer so far ever was one of them just said, I'd punch him in the face. I was like, whoa. I don't quite feel that way about my 18-year-old self.
No, I don't know if I could bring myself to do that, even if it was me. Right. No, that is a good question. It's a big question. Maybe it's just take a moment to slow down a little bit. Sometimes when you're an 18-year-old kid, and that's hard, right? And in a lot of ways, you just don't do that because you're gung-ho, because you want to get into everything, and so you just you say yes, you know, like you just kind of dive in, but you're not thinking, you know, you're not necessarily thinking ahead. But I hesitate to say that because like we need to go through experiences, you know, and again, it's not condoning or excusing anything, but those experiences are going to shape you. Like, how do you learn? Of course, you got to get in. So I don't necessarily mean slow down in the sense of, oh, hey, stop yourself from doing certain things. But if you just, you know, sit back a little bit, think a little bit more, have that perspective, right, to look a little bit more big picture, because when you're young, when you're 18, when you're starting college or in college, so focused on the here and now, you know, just the present day and what's in front of you. And so maybe just benefit by a little taking a few steps back. Yeah, for sure. That's good. I think so often, like, and this is, I know this isn't a good out for that question, but a lot of times the answer to that question is, I don't think I would have listened, you know? And that's exactly why I like your answer so much, is that, like, you're not giving them some, like, big, you know, whatever. Yeah, it's just like, hey, speech, man, you know? Like, essentially what you're saying is, let the Lord do his work, you know? Yeah. Just take a deep breath, slow down. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because what you think is world-ending problem turns out to not quite be that. Yeah, it's not such a big deal after all. Good. Yep. All right, and what does it mean to be a man? What makes a Christian man? So this is, I mean, I've actually, in a very small way, been involved in this podcast before. And I think I remember exactly, you know, what my approach was to this question the first time around. And I don't know that it's that much different. But maybe I could add a little bit to it. So I'm going to try to do that. That was a men's conference, right? It was, yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Yep, because I was there. So I've kind of had a first shot at these. Yeah. But I think my first answer changed. Yeah, thank you. It's good to be back. And what I remember saying is that, what does it mean to be a man? It means that you're someone who is into God's word. Into it in the sense of, you know, not like, oh, this is my thing. I mean, obviously, we want that to be the case. But you're into it as in you're spending time in it. You're digging into it. You're exploring it. Because how many passages in Scripture, how many books in Scripture just are like flyover states? You know, you want to get, oh, look, here we're in Genesis, and we've landed at the Gospels, because that's where we like to spend all of our time. And I'm like, oh, you're missing so much richness and depth. And you know, I personally like the poetic, you know, books, and getting into Psalms and Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, maybe even Song of Songs. Yeah. You know. You gotta be a little careful with that one. No. But like, oh, there's so much. Habakkuk is one of my favorites. To be a man, right? If you're going to be a leader, right? Because if God has called you to be a leader, and that's in whatever vocation, you know, it doesn't mean you're not going to be a leader in the same way that the guy next to you is going to be a leader. But if God's called you to be a leader, and I believe he has, right, then you got to get in the word, right? because you got to have something to be based off of. You got to have something to ground yourself. You got to have something that you're going to build on and you're going to actually use when you're actively leading someone. And you have to have that understanding in the times when you are the one who is being led. So that's what I would say, most of all. That's, what it means to be a man. And then outside of that, let's be careful.
Yeah.
Let's be careful to put too many boundaries in. I mean, because, maybe what it looks like for me is not what it looks like for you.
Yeah, I think, again, you hit it spot on the head, man. Like that idea of being, not even just being a Christian man, but the Christian life is way less about rules than we like to make it. We like to make it about rules, which is really works righteousness when you really dig into that. And it's way less about rules, and it's way more about being yielded to the Spirit. Yeah. Will I follow where the Father leads?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, so true. Yeah, because we kind of crave, whether we acknowledge it or not, we crave structure, right?
Yeah.
We want some set of rules. We want to know if we're fitting in, or we want to know if we're up to par. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes, it digs at us because we realize, oh, we're not all that.
Yeah. Well, and then that's where the masculinity and femininity come in, and that's where when we lose, gender, it's a big deal to Christians, because when you lose gender, essentially you're taking away a lot of what gives you purpose as a man of God, is the unique gifts and roles and abilities that God has given to men and given to women. We're not the same. No. And so following him, like when you are following him, he's going to ask you to do very different things based on what your skills and abilities are, and what your station in life and all those things. And if you're not going to be a man, it's going to impact your ability to follow the way you ought, the way that we would hope to.
Right. Yeah, and to see them and to recognize how it's complementary, to recognize the beauty and the gifts that God has afforded, in each case. And right, but you realize, and you're saying it, right, how that is all based on Scripture, right? And as soon as we, stretch and take too many steps away, it enters our world, like it affects our world all the way down to that, all the way down to masculinity, all the way down to femininity. Like it starts to unravel, and so that's why it does bring us back to that first point. And to uphold what God says and to take what God says just at his word. And obviously that's a faith thing. It comes down to that faith. Not that we're banking on our own faith, right? No, we're going to trust in Christ. That's the Christian life. But it takes faith to come to those recognitions, right? To understand creation for all that it's worth, because creation is huge. And it sets down and it is laid so clearly, and it gives us the path. It's a path to be a man, a path to be a woman, and not those, where we become too restrictive, because the human nature would love to just, take that and squeeze it and then, make everything uncomfortable more than, what God has actually put forward in his word. But we need each other. And we need guys to be guys so that they can be leaders, so that they can interact with girls, in upstanding ways, so that they can bring out the best in each other, so that we can appreciate how girls interact and view us as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we got to get the plug-ins here. So one of the big things that makes us men is our beards. Right?
That's right. Yes.
We are a couple of bearded bros.
We are.
And before we go here, we got to give a big shout out to Nate Hensler, the Brigadier General himself. He sent us some. Real good beard oil here. So we got sandalwood. This one is Deep in the Wood. This is the one I'm wearing right now, actually.
Okay.
I've been wearing it all day. It smells great. And this one's Whiskey Barrel, which I'm a big whiskey fan, too. Thank you, first of all, for the beard oil. And if you're looking for good if you're looking for good beard oil, it's not as easy to find as you'd think, especially if you're going to like Walgreens and looking around. Like I love Walgreens, but it's hard to find good quality products. Do you put anything in your beard?
I mean, I used to, because actually it was, especially over certain winters, right? I'll actually, grow it out much more and let it go. And yeah, when it gets to a certain point, then I do. But I'm still on the search for that. Like I've had one, and actually a good friend, AJ. I mean, AJ's kind of pointed me and given me some stuff that I have appreciated, but I've kind of gotten away from it a little bit. So.
Well, why don't you give someone a try?
There we go.
All right, which one do you want to use? Deep in the Woods, Sandalwood, or Whiskey Barrel?
Should we do Whiskey Barrel?
There you go. Yeah, go ahead. So just a little bit of a dollop on your palm, not too much.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and rub it in. Bit. So rub it into your hands first, and then rub it into your beard.
Okay.
I'm gonna do some more of this one because I just took a shower. I could use some more here. I feel like I'm on Whoa, that's way too much. I feel like I'm on QVC or something.
All right.
All right. Yep.
So now just kind of
rub it in your beard, get it all over the place.
Well, it smells nice.
It smells great.
Yes, for one.
Yeah. Awesome. I like to, a lot of times I'll use like a paste or a balm or something instead. But
yeah.
Now, dude, this stuff is really good, and I'm really thankful for it. So if you want to go ahead, support the guys that support us on the podcast, go ahead, find Brigadier General. He's got a store on Facebook right now. And otherwise, he's just got a lot of good stuff going on. He's a good man of God. He's a Wells teacher, graduate of MLC. Just a generally good dude who's committed to being a man after God's own heart. And so thank you for sending that to us. And if you're looking for good beard oil, man, that's the place to get it, Brigadier General. Thanks, Nate. And thank you, JD, for being on the show, man.
Oh, yeah. No,
appreciate it, dude. Love having conversations with you. Love seeing you around. Love seeing you do your thing in ministry as well. So
yeah.
All right. God's blessings, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gird Up Podcast. If you like what you're hearing on our podcast, make sure you're sharing it with friends and family, men in your life who you think need to hear our message. You can find us on social media, on Facebook under the Gird Up Podcast, and there's a Gird Up community as well there where you can interact with other men on the journey toward Christian manhood. You can find us on Instagram as girdup_like_a_man. If you'd like to help us bring our message to more men just like you all around the world, you can hit up our Patreon account. Type in www.patreon.com/girdup. And finally, please leave a 5-star rating or review on whatever platform you use to listen to our podcast, whether it's iTunes or Spotify. What that does is it helps us get more attention in the podcast world and bring more men to our message. Thank you again for listening to our podcast. Thank you for all the ways you support us and help spread the word. Until next time, go gird up and be the man that God created you to be.